The morning my grandfather died, I sat alone in the hospital waiting room while my parents comforted my younger sister Ella. She hadn't even been close to him, hadn't visited him in months. But there they were, surrounding her with tissues and gentle words while I processed my grief in silence. This scene perfectly captured the last 28 years of my life. Growing up as the invisible child teaches you things no one should have to learn. You learn to celebrate your victories quietly because no one else will. You learn that your straight A's mean nothing when your sister brings home a B- and gets taken out for ice cream. You learn that graduating summa cum laude from college gets you a pat on the back, while Ella dropping out after her second semester gets her a car to help her figure things out. My grandfather was different though. Harold Thompson saw me. Really saw me. While my parents fawned over Ella's every breath, Grandpa would pull me aside during family gatherings, ask about my job at the engineering firm, genuinely interested in my projects. He'd slip me $20 bills with a wink, telling me to buy something just for yourself, not for anyone else. Those moments kept me sane. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and hushed conversations. I gave the eulogy because Ella said she was too emotional, though I watched her texting throughout the service. My parents sat in the front row, Mom's arm around Ella's shoulders, Dad holding her hand. I stood at that podium, talking about the man who taught me to fish, who attended every science fair when my parents were too busy with Ella's dance recitals, and I felt more alone than ever. 3 days after we buried him, Dad called a family meeting. He used his official voice. The one that meant serious business was about to be discussed. We gathered in the living room, the same room where every family announcement had been made. The room where they told us Ella was getting a new bedroom suite while I kept my childhood furniture. The room where they announced they'd be missing my college graduation to take Ella on a spa weekend to help her cope with her breakup. Dad cleared his throat, adjusting his reading glasses with the theatrical precision of someone about to deliver important news. Mom sat beside him, her hand resting on a manila folder that I recognized as Grandpa's will. Ella curled up in her favorite armchair, the one she'd claimed as a teenager and that nobody else was allowed to sit in, even now that we were both adults. As you know, Dad began, Grandpa named me as the executor of his estate. It's a responsibility I take very seriously. He opened the folder with deliberate slowness. The estate is substantial, approximately $500,000 after all debts and expenses. My heart skipped. I knew Grandpa had been comfortable, but I hadn't realized the extent of his savings. He'd lived modestly, driving the same truck for 15 years, shopping at discount stores, never flashy with his money. This must have been a lifetime of careful saving and smart investments. The will states that the money should be divided equally among his grandchildren, Dad continued, and then he paused. That pause that preceded every piece of bad news in our family. However, as executor, I have a fiduciary duty to ensure the estate is distributed in a way that honors Grandpa's true intentions. The room grew heavy with tension. Ella shifted in her chair, suddenly very interested in her manicured nails. Mom's jaw tightened in that way it did when she was about to defend something indefensible. After much discussion and prayer, Dad said, and I almost laughed at the prayer part since he hadn't been to church in a decade. Your mother and I believe Grandpa would want the money to go where it's most needed. Ella is at a crossroads in her life. She needs stability, a fresh start. The inheritance would give her that opportunity. The words hung in the air like a slap I should have seen coming, but somehow didn't. All of it. They wanted to give all of it to Ella. My portion, her portion, everything to the golden child who had already received everything else. You can't be serious, I heard myself say, my voice steady despite the volcano building in my chest. The will says equal distribution. That means half to me. Half to Ella. That's literally what equal means. Mom leaned forward with that expression she always wore when she was about to justify the unjustifiable. Sweetheart, you have to understand. You have a good job, a stable life. You're doing fine on your own. Ella needs this money to get on her feet. It's what family does. We help each other. The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. Help each other. When had they ever helped me? When I worked 3 jobs to pay for college while they paid Ella's full tuition. When I ate ramen for months to afford my first apartment while they furnished Ella's luxury condo. The will specifically states equal distribution, I repeated, my voice growing firmer. Grandpa wrote it that way for a reason. You can't just decide to change it because you think Ella needs it more. Ella finally looked up, her eyes wide with practiced innocence. I mean, if Grandpa really wanted us to share equally, wouldn't he have made sure the will was more specific? Maybe Dad's right about his true intentions. The rage that filled me was white-hot and pure. She knew. She knew exactly what was happening and she was playing along, just like she always had. The little girl who would break my toys and then cry until Mom bought her new ones while mine remained broken. The teenager who would fail a test and somehow make it my fault for not helping her study, even though I'd offered countless times. The will is specific, I said, standing up. And as executor, Dad has a legal obligation to follow it, not interpret it based on his personal preferences. Dad's face darkened. Are you threatening me? Your own father? Over money? I'm stating facts. This isn't about threats. It's about fairness. For once in my life, it's about fairness. Mom gasped as if I'd cursed in church. How can you be so selfish? Your sister needs this money. You should want to help her. Family helps family. When has this family ever helped me? The words exploded out before I could stop them. 28 years of silence breaking like a dam. When I needed help with college? When I was working myself sick to pay rent? When I missed meals to afford textbooks? Where was this family helps family mentality then? The room erupted. Mom started crying. Not the gentle tears she reserved for Ella's problems, but angry, accusatory sobs meant to make me feel guilty. Dad stood up, his face red with indignation, pointing his finger at me like I was a disappointing employee rather than his son. "You've always been jealous of your sister," he accused. "Always keeping score, always resentful. We've given you everything we could." "Everything?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Name one time, just one, when you chose me over her. One school event you attended for me when there was a conflict with hers. One achievement of mine you celebrated without immediately pivoting to something about Ella." Silence. Even Ella had stopped pretending to examine her nails. "That's what I thought," I said quietly. "And now you want to take the one thing Grandpa specifically left to me, the one person who actually saw me as more than Ella's brother, and give that to her too." I pulled out my phone, my hands surprisingly steady. "I'm calling Uncle Robert. He's a lawyer, and he was Grandpa's best friend. Let's see what he thinks about this interpretation of the will." Dad lunged forward. "Don't you dare bring the rest of the family into this. This is between us." "No," I said, already dialing. "This stopped being between us the moment you decided to steal my inheritance. Grandpa trusted you to execute his will, not rewrite it," Uncle Robert answered on the second ring. I put him on speaker and explained the situation in clear, clinical terms. The silence on the other end stretched for several long seconds before he spoke. "I'm coming over. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. Harold was very specific about his wishes when he drafted that will, and I was there as a witness." His voice was steel. "And bring your grandmother. She needs to hear this." The color drained from Dad's face. Grandma, Grandpa's widow, who had been staying with her sister since the funeral, processing her grief. The woman who had lost her husband of 53 years and was about to find out her son was trying to subvert his final wishes. Grandma arrived before Uncle Robert, and the moment she walked through the door, I knew she knew something was wrong. Hazel Thompson was 81 years old, barely 5 feet tall, but she carried herself like a queen. Her sharp blue eyes, the same ones Grandpa had fallen in love with at a dance in 1969, surveyed the room and landed on the manila folder still sitting on the coffee table. "What's this about Harold's will?" she asked, her voice deceptively calm. Dad tried to explain, using the same rehearsed words about fiduciary duty and true intentions. With each word, Grandma's expression grew colder. By the time Uncle Robert arrived with Uncle James and Aunt Patricia in tow, the temperature in the room had dropped to Arctic levels. "Show me the will," Grandma demanded. Dad handed it over reluctantly. She read it slowly, deliberately, then looked up at her son with an expression I'd never seen before, pure disappointment. "Harold spent weeks on this will," she said quietly. "He consulted lawyers, financial advisors. He wanted to make sure it was ironclad, equal distribution among grandchildren. He even included a clause." She flipped to the second page. "Right here. Any attempt to contest or circumvent this distribution will result in the challenging party forfeiting their role as executor and any inheritance they might receive." The room went silent. Dad's face went from red to white in seconds. Uncle Robert cleared his throat. "There's more you should know. Harold suspected this might happen. He came to me a month before he died, worried about certain conversations he'd overheard. Conversations between you," he looked at my parents, "about how Ella needed financial support and how unfair it was that the will didn't account for different needs." My stomach turned. They'd been planning this. While Grandpa was dying, they'd been plotting to redirect my inheritance to Ella. "He made me promise," Uncle Robert continued, "that if anything like this happened, I would ensure his wishes were carried out. He also left this." He pulled out an envelope from his jacket pocket, my name written on it in Grandpa's shaky handwriting. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter dated just 2 weeks before Grandpa's death. Everyone watched as I read it aloud. "My dear grandson, if you're reading this, then Robert has kept his promise, and something has gone wrong with my will. I want you to know that I see you. I've always seen you. I've watched you fight for every scrap of recognition, work twice as hard for half the acknowledgement, and still maintain your kind heart despite the unfairness of it all. The money I'm leaving you isn't just an inheritance, it's an apology from someone who should have spoken up sooner. I should have confronted your parents about their favoritism years ago. I should have been louder in my support of you. But I was a coward, afraid of creating conflict in the family. That ends now. This money is yours by right and by my express wish. Do not let anyone, not even family, convince you that you don't deserve it. You've earned every penny through years of neglect and disappointment that you bore with grace I could never have managed. Use it to build the life you deserve, free from the shadow of always coming second. And know that in my heart, you were never second. You were extraordinary, just waiting for someone to notice." I noticed. Grandpa. By the time I finished reading, tears were streaming down my face. Grandma had moved to stand beside me, her hand on my shoulder. Even Ella looked stunned, perhaps hearing for the first time an outside perspective on our family dynamics. "How dare he?" Mom whispered. But Grandma cut her off with a look that could have frozen hell. "How dare he what? Love his grandson? See the truth? Call out the obvious favoritism that everyone else has been too polite to mention?" Grandma's voice rose with each question. "I've held my tongue for years, watching you two pour everything into Ella while treating your son like an afterthought. Harold begged me to say something, but I kept telling him it wasn't our place. Well, he's gone now. And I'll be damned if I let you dishonor his memory by stealing from the one grandchild who actually spent time with him." The truth hung in the air like a physical presence. Ella hadn't visited Grandpa in 6 months before his death. I'd been there every Sunday, bringing groceries, playing cards, listening to his stories about the war that I'd heard 100 times but never tired of. "This is ridiculous," Dad finally managed, his voice lacking its earlier authority. We're Ella's parents. We know what's best for our children. Clearly you don't, Uncle James interjected. He'd been quiet until now, but I remembered him pulling me aside at family gatherings, slipping me extra money, telling me he was proud of my achievements. Do you have any idea what the rest of the family thinks about how you've treated these two? We've watched for years as you've created a golden child and a scapegoat. We've seen the damage it's done to both of them. Both of them. I looked at Ella, really looked at her for the first time in years. Behind the perfect makeup and designer clothes, I saw something I'd never noticed before. Fear. She was 26 years old, had never held a job for more than 3 months, had no degree, no skills, no real relationships outside of our parents' protective bubble. The favoritism hadn't just hurt me, it had crippled her. Ella started, then stopped, looking at our parents as if for permission to speak. When none came, she continued anyway. I knew about the plan, about trying to get all the money. Mom and Dad told me weeks ago. They said it was for my own good, that I needed it more. She paused, her voice getting smaller. But sitting here, listening to all of this, I'm 26 and I can't even pay my own phone bill. Maybe the favoritism hurt me too, Mom gasped. Ella, sweetheart, we've only ever wanted what's best for you. No, Ella said, surprising everyone, including herself. You wanted me to need you. You wanted me to stay your little girl forever, and I let you because it was easier than growing up. The room fell silent again, but this silence was different. It was the silence of truth finally spoken, of patterns finally recognized, of a family dynamic finally, irrevocably shattered. Uncle Robert cleared his throat. As an attorney, I need to inform you that if you proceed with this plan to redistribute the inheritance against the will's explicit instructions, I will personally represent my nephew in taking legal action. The will is clear, legally binding, and includes protections against exactly this scenario. Dad slumped back in his chair, defeated. Fine. The will stands as written. Equal distribution. But I wasn't done. 28 years of being overlooked had finally found its voice, and that voice had things to say. It's not just about the money, I said. It's about the pattern. Every birthday where Ella got a party and I got a card. Every Christmas where she got everything on her list and I got practical gifts. Every achievement of mine that was minimized while hers were celebrated. The money is just the latest in a lifetime of inequity. We didn't mean to, Mom said weakly. Ella was just. She needed more attention. She was sensitive, struggled more. Because you never let her struggle, Grandma interjected. You cushioned every fall, fixed every problem, cleared every obstacle. And with him, she pointed at me, you did the opposite. Expected him to figure everything out on his own, handle his own problems, be the responsible one. You created this dynamic. Aunt Patricia, who had been a child psychologist before retiring, spoke up. This is textbook golden child, scapegoat dynamic. It's a form of emotional abuse, whether intentional or not. Both children suffer, one from neglect, one from enmeshment. The fact that Harold saw it and tried to protect against it in his will speaks volumes. Over the next hour, the full extent of the favoritism was laid bare. Uncle Robert revealed that Grandpa had kept a journal documenting instances where he'd witnessed the disparity. Grandma shared stories of holidays where my accomplishments were brushed aside. Uncle James talked about family gatherings where I was expected to help with everything while Ella was treated like a guest. Each revelation was another crack in my parents' defenses. Mom cried. Real tears this time, not the manipulative ones from earlier. Dad's face cycled through anger, denial, and finally, something that might have been shame. But it was Ella who surprised me the most. As the conversation continued, she began to share her own perspective. The pressure of being the golden child. The fear of disappointing our parents. The realization that she had no idea who she was outside of their expectations and protection. I want to apologize, she said, looking directly at me. Not just for this, but for everything. For letting it happen. For benefiting from it. For never standing up for you. I was a coward. And I'm sorry. The weeks following that confrontation were transformative. The will was executed as written. I received my $250,000 inheritance, as did Ella. But more importantly, the family dynamic that had defined my entire life had finally been exposed and challenged. Dad remained hostile for weeks, barely speaking to me, treating me like I'd betrayed the family. Mom oscillated between guilt and defensiveness, occasionally attempting to reach out but always with undertones of, but you have to understand our position. Their calls grew less frequent, their texts more sparse. But unexpected relationships bloomed. Ella and I began texting, tentatively at first, then with increasing frequency. She enrolled in community college using part of her inheritance, determined to build something of her own. She started therapy, confronting years of learned helplessness and enmeshment. We met for coffee one Sunday, and she broke down crying, apologizing again, telling me about all the times she'd wanted to speak up but was afraid of losing her favored status. I was so scared of being treated like you were, she admitted. I saw how hard you had it, and I was terrified that if I defended you, I'd lose their love. It's sick. I know that now. Grandma became a regular part of my life. Sunday dinners at her house replaced the obligatory family gatherings I'd endured for years. She shared stories about Grandpa I'd never heard, including how he'd secretly set aside money for years, specifically to ensure I'd have something they couldn't take away. He loved you so much, she told me one evening. He saw himself in you. The quiet determination, the resilience. He used to say you were the strongest person he knew, carrying that burden of invisibility with such grace. Uncle Robert helped me invest the inheritance wisely. Some went to paying off the student loans I'd been struggling with for years. Some went into a retirement account. A portion went to therapy, something I desperately needed to process nearly 3 decades of emotional neglect. My therapist helped me understand that the favoritism wasn't really about me or Ella. It was about our parents' own insecurities and needs. Mom had projected all her unfulfilled dreams onto Ella, living vicariously through her. Dad had seen me as competition, threatened by my independence and success achieved without his help. Understanding didn't excuse it, but it helped me stop blaming myself. 6 months after the will confrontation, our family had reformed into something unrecognizable but healthier. Mom had started her own therapy after Ella had made it a condition of maintaining contact. She'd begun to acknowledge the damage they'd done, though she still struggled with fully accepting responsibility. She called me one evening, her voice different, smaller, more genuine. "I need to apologize," she said. "Really apologize, not make excuses. We failed you. I failed you. I see that now." Ella's therapist recommended a book about family dynamics and I saw our family on every page. The golden child, the scapegoat. I did that. We did that. I'm so sorry. It wasn't enough to erase 28 years, but it was a start. Dad remained the holdout, his pride too wounded to admit fault. But even he had begun to soften, especially after Ella had confronted him about his role in stunting her growth. She'd told him she was grateful for the inheritance because it forced her to finally grow up, to become her own person. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. The money from Grandpa did more than pay off debts and secure my future. It gave me the freedom to make choices based on what I wanted, not what I could afford. I took a sabbatical from work to travel, something I'd always dreamed of but never thought possible. I visited places Grandpa had told me about from his Navy days. I sent postcards to Grandma from each location. Ella used her inheritance to not just attend college but to get her own apartment, her first time truly living independently. She got a part-time job, not because she needed the money but because she needed the experience of earning something herself. We met for dinner once a month, building the sibling relationship we'd never been allowed to have. "I'm proud of you," I told her one evening, and meant it. She'd worked harder in 6 months than she had in the previous 26 years. "I'm proud of you too," she replied, "for standing up to them, for standing up for yourself. You saved us both that day, you know? If you'd let them take that money, we'd have just continued the pattern forever." The inheritance became a symbol of transformation, not just financial transformation, but emotional and relational. Grandpa's final gift wasn't just money. It was the catalyst that broke toxic patterns and forced long overdue reckonings. At Thanksgiving that year, we had 2 dinners. One at Grandma's with the uncles, aunts, Ella, and me. One at my parents', smaller, quieter, still navigating the new dynamics. Both were peaceful in their own way. The family had fractured and reformed, like a broken bone that heals stronger at the breakpoint. Standing at Grandpa's grave on the anniversary of his death, I left a letter thanking him, not just for the money, but for seeing me, for validating my worth, for ensuring that even in death, he protected me from those who should have protected me themselves. Ella stood beside me, and for the first time in our lives, we felt like actual siblings. The golden child and the scapegoat were gone. In their place stood 2 adults, scarred but healing, building lives of their own choosing, and somewhere, I knew Grandpa was smiling, knowing his final act of love had achieved more than he'd ever imagined.